this month, and we have Mr. Gerald Taylor KC5MWZ is presenting a program on electromagnetic pulse, EMP. For those of you who don't know about EMPs, they can happen both naturally as well as man-made. So stand by to learn what you can do about this problem and to be ready when the time comes. Without further ado, I will go ahead and turn the meeting over to Gerald. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Good morning, all. I'm glad to be here.
Yay.
Yay.
Let me give you a little background. I'm a member of SHARES, which is the... Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's the High Frequency Radio Resources Group for Department of Homeland Security. We do emergency communications on HF primarily for basically all the U.S. government agencies and some of the NGOs. We work nationally as well as into the Atlantic and Pacific, and also down in the Caribbean and up into Canada. So we're broadly associated across all the United States and its protectorates, to include Hawaii, Guam, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, and some other cooperating groups, Canadian Mars, for example, and the Canadian government agencies also participate from time to time. We do have monthly, what we call IWG, is internal working group meetings. We have routine nets that we operate during the week. We have, of course, special nets when we have things like hurricanes and sometimes football games and other standbys. If y'all remember the New Orleans Super Bowl a few years back when the lights went out during the Super Bowl, I was the Sheriff's National Net Control on duty when the lights went out in the Super Bowl. That was an interesting hour or so, believe me. But we're out there, we're active, we're there every day. Many people don't know about us. If you get the American Radio Relay League bulletins, the latest one I saw has a discussion on there about some of the sheriff's participation with FEMA and some of the alert methods and alert operations that we're doing, practicing with FEMA. And we're also practicing with USA Northcom. We've had some practice sessions with them lately, United States North Command, US Army, DOD. So we're pretty involved in the national emergency communications operations on HF. Again, it's all volunteer for the sheriff's members. Most of us are either current or ex members of Mars. Some members, of course, the Coast Guard Reserve, but used to be the Navy Reserve, the Navy Mars program. It's not there anymore. It's gone. But the Air Force and Army Mars groups still are participating. Some of the old Navy members, Navy Mars members still participate, and as well as the Coast Guard Auxiliary, of which I'm officially a participant now. Also operate to help support and operate the nets and the day-to-day workings of the Sheriff's program. This program is one that was presented at our, like it says, at our February 2016 internal working group meeting. So it's been around a while. This information is open to the public. Most of it is derived from public information that has been printed elsewhere. It's just been coordinated and organized here. It's kind of a long set of slides, but I understand these will be available to you for review anytime you wish. So we'll try to work through them here pretty quickly. And I'm gonna leave it mostly to you to look at and read the things. If you have any questions about anything, I'll try to answer those. But go through these, like I say, if you have something you find really interesting, you want to see quickly or keep, you can easily snap a picture, of course, with your cell phone camera or whatever camera you might have there. This is not intended to scare anybody. They just to inform. Okay, you've seen slide one. Of course, there'll be the various disclaimers and so forth up here. The last paragraph there, I did get permission from Sheriff's headquarters to disseminate this to amateur radio members. Pertinent information. Another disclaimer. As you can see, some of this information was derived from our own nuclear tests, weapons tests. Also, you'll see some information here from a Russian general who was involved.
So was this a test that the U.S. ran in
Yes.
62?
Yes.
I think you told a story earlier how they started this, how they figured it out. You want to go through that piece?
Well, yeah. Basically, when they first started doing the test, the nuclear test, and Pacific especially, doing the thermonuclear H-bomb testing out there in the Bikini Atoll area, they actually had some power system failures and other failures in Hawaii and some other associated islands, which of course was not broadly disseminated information for a long time, but it did happen. And then also the Russians had similar experiences in their early testing that resulted in some EMP damage to some of their areas. It'll be discussed in here somewhat a bit later in some of these slides, but this gives you a background of where a lot of this information has been derived. And you can see that for a 1.4 megaton device, it's really a pretty small nuclear device. That is not huge these days. When the Russians are talking about 100 megatons. See, this was over Johnson Island out in the South Pacific, and 100 nanoseconds after the explosion, Hawaii experienced a 5.6 kV EMP event. You can see some of the effects here. So you can see how widespread that could be, and even that at that kind of a distance.
Question.
Go ahead, Phil.
This last statement down here, this EMP commission, which is the congressional commission, you can see what this says, months or longer. Well, the or longer should be highly emphasized there if it's a big one. This is regions based on the burst height. Of course, the higher it is, the broader area it's going to cover, since we're talking about a curved surface. As it goes over the horizon, as it gets higher. In the lower left-hand corner here, you see where this came from General Loborev, Director of Central Institute of Physics and Technology for Russia, Soviet Union, June 1994.
Phil, did you have a question in there?
I have a question. Back
Go
on the other slide.
This one, that one.
One more back. Does that mean that if you hold a 1 meter long wire up in that field during that EMP, you could get that kind of voltage across that wire?
Yes.
That's a lot of voltage.
It's like dead voltage.
Yeah,
Yeah, we used to work for the electric company. That,
that's transmission lines. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
So don't wear glasses either then.
Well, plastic ones would be good.
Voltage is one thing, current's another.
Yeah.
You need the combination to provide any power. Of course, voltage can damage sensitive electronic devices even at very low currents.
5
Would-
milliamps across the heart will kill you. But yeah.
Like, wouldn't do my radio any good.
Well, if you got the old tube type with the globes in it, that thing would probably love it. But these in the solid states don't like it too much. You can see some of the stuff that they experienced. The power breakdown safety devices were burned at the 600 kilometers away. And power supply breakdown, lost communications, all kinds of problems they experienced, malfunction in radio location systems. And the long line problems, meaning the longer the wires were, the more problems they had, the higher voltages, of course. So since it's a voltage per meter effect, and that was a 300 kiloton, which is much, much smaller than the first page. This is just a fraction the size of the 1.4 megaton. And that was at 290 kilometers altitude. So you can see that they do have significant effects. Go back. Here's some effects that they've seen on electronic equipment.
Yeah, Phil, there's your power line stuff. SCADA is gone. And Paul, I think, is in there too.
You see the actual damaged areas here in some of the equipment.
And this is from natural event, right? This is from a solar event.
This is ESD. It doesn't say what it is. I don't think it is. Just how to do the electromagnetic pulse.
Yikes.
Does this extend up into the microwave frequency range?
That's especially true for the man-made stuff. It does go into the microwave range, way up in there. And it's hard to stop. You have to have like a minus 80 dB shielding to stop it.
Wow.
You got to get really, really tough stuff. This is some of the probably more current pertinent information to us on what some of the Koreans, in conjunction with the Iranians and probably the Chinese and even the Russians are doing to us. You need to read this one probably in some detail.
That February 7th, was that 2016?
I don't think so. It might be earlier than that. I'm not sure what date it was. Looks like
The date on the slide is the 25th.
earlier than that, because this says follows the launch in 2012. So I'm not sure what this is, the partial quote. I don't know what year for sure it was, but apparently after 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, we found out here during this ice storm, you can't go without your cell phone more than 20, 30 minutes.
Who says you can't?
Look around.
I only turn mine on if I take it with me when I leave the house, and if I remember to turn it on.
You're the only one.
I run it; it doesn't run me.
That's correct.
You guys digested enough of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a key thing here. Last week, there was a $700 million contract let to build up the EMP protection capability of Cheyenne Mountain. I've been to Cheyenne Mountain. It's an interesting place.
That was 5 years ago. So, good Lord, what have they done now?
Yeah, I was up there in the 72. There's more information on the Korean capabilities, likely Korean capabilities. And you can see that these satellites, if you look at the NORAD or NASA satellite listing, you'll see that these satellites are still listed as functional, as up there and probably operational. Letters in red here are interesting little comments. And again, I understand this will be available to you anytime you want to go look at it. So you can certainly go back and review in more detail if you wish.
I thought EMP wasn't actually supposed to be damaging to human life. It was just meant to take care of infrastructure.
Well, look at the last few days without power, and imagine all these hospitals without power. Look at what happens with all the patients in the hospital. Look at what happens to your food supply. Look at what happens to your transportation and your other services, and what's going to happen in 3 months without power. When nobody's food is any good anymore in the freezer, they run out of canned goods and they can't go to the grocery store and buy food, what's going to happen? Lock and load.
Well, those that planned ahead are smart.
Yeah, but my Brahms will run out by then.
Yeah, the problem is you got to keep what you got. Here's a comment from former CIA Director Woolsey, Peter Pry, in 2014 in the Wall Street Journal. See this? This is kind of like the fact that we learned multiple times about pandemics, including one from President Bush, made a big effort during his second term, I believe it was, to prepare for pandemics. And virtually nothing got done about it. And now we got COVID. And everybody's complaining that, well, President Trump didn't do anything, but how about all the rest of them between Bush and Trump? What did they do? Nothing. So those people can't be pointing fingers at Trump about anything, because they didn't do it either. And they were told in clear, plain language by George W. Bush that you needed to do something about this. And it didn't get done. Here's some information on, this was older information, but it's on some of the nuclear facilities in North Korea that we know about.
Gerald, real quick, go back to the last slide.
Okay, this one.
Yes.
What do you need to look at here?
I was looking at the live tracking of that satellite at the bottom.
Yeah, okay. This is its catalog number. So if you go to Celeste Track or any of those for the NORAD or NASA tracking data, you'll look for this catalog satellite number right here.
Is that what? Okay.
sure that's probably what that is the catalog number for that satellite. How many of you do amateur satellites? Anybody? You track any
do.
amateur satellites?
Yes.
Well, the same information from the satellite sources will have these in there too if you look at deep enough and find them. Of course, there's many satellites up there, so you want to go try looking for one, you need the number to search for, you know, from whatever satellite tracking you're using. There's some multiple ones out there. Heavens Above is one, and of course you can go straight to what's it called? Can't remember the name.
That link there, N2YO does it. It's over South America right now, so we're
Yeah.
good.
So you can see what its satellite period means. Its orbital time is 95 minutes. So it comes over every 95 minutes somewhere. Nuclear facilities again. Some of the saber rattling from North Korea. But Iran's been making the same kind of noises. There's one here that you ought to read. That is a whole different level of EMP. That last sentence down there interest anybody?
As far back as 2012.
Yep. We go to another level here from when you read this, then you understand why the agreement between Obama's administration and Iran left so much out that should have been there in terms of inspections at all their facilities, rather than leaving out critical facilities that we couldn't go inspect, and also that they insisted we announce inspections well before we actually performed the inspections. And such an agreement in these circumstances was, shall we say, unacceptable. I'm being very nice about that. You read this and you begin to understand more why President Trump opted out of that agreement.
For good reason.
Of course, we gave the Iranians several $100 billion to build more of this stuff with.
Pallets of cash.
Load full of money, huh?
Pallets of cash.
Yes. You think that went to their sick and needy and poor?
Sure it did. Of course it did.
And Trump also started the Space Force.
Yep. You know, technically, if you get down to the nitty gritty, we probably still are at a state of war with Iran over the taking of our embassy under Jimmy Carter. Because that's an act of war, international law. If you take someone's embassy and property, considered an invasion of their territory for an act of war.
Now I'm wondering if that new X-37 project that they've got going on has anything to do with EMP.
The last blurb I saw about the X-37B was that it is possibly laser equipped. Into comment. I suspect that's kind of like what I experienced in the 70s. Actually, we get it in the 60s rather. When I went to work at Tinker Air Force Base one Monday morning, and there was a whole flight of B-47 bombers sitting out there in K&L rows. They had ropes around them, sat guards, armed sat guards standing all around them. And on the bomb bay door and the nose wheel door, there was a little white sign with black letters about 18, 20 inches long. It said explosives. And I considered that to be probably a serious understatement. That was the Monday morning of the evening when President Kennedy announced the Cuban crisis. So that explosives, I think, was a significant understatement of the condition. They had about 10 megatons hanging in the Bombay.
I'd definitely get their attention.
You know, all these statements put together add up. This philosophy is very, very dangerous. Because they're saying, well, we didn't kill you. You killed yourself by not being prepared. To some extent, that's true. However, nobody twisted your arm and made you detonate that weapon to start with. That was your choice.
Yep.
But that's not the way they, I guess I would call this Orwellian speak. Anybody besides me read 1984?
Yes.
I actually recently reread it.
It's what is currently referred to these days as spin.
Well, I thought it was prophecy.
Well, this could be prophecy, I'm afraid. Prophecy is one thing that's forecasting the future. However, spin or Orwellian speak 1984 variety is aimed at deliberately misinforming and misguiding. It's a mode of deception.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things in 1984 that are actually already here now.
You tell me about
it. Cameras in our homes.
Who put them there?
Wait a second, I did.
Yeah, you did.
Voluntarily.
I don't have any cameras in my home except the one I plugged in just for this show. And when I get through with this show, it's gonna
Well, yes, and same here, but point made.
You know, I've got cameras outside, but again, they're not on the internet. But that's the camera is one thing, but this stuff like Alexa is another thing altogether. Ain't coming to my house. Ever.
No, she's not welcome here.
Not
Well, think
happening
about
here.
this. If you're not using your camera when you're on Zoom or something else, do you do anything with it?
I unplug it.
I unplug mine as well as soon as this is over.
Well, okay. What about the ones on your computers? Your iPads, your iPhones?
Mine either have a piece of tape over them, or my wife's actually has a slick little sliding cover.
Yeah, I just bought 3 of those off Amazon for our computers so we can cover them.
Mine's turned off and closed down. It wouldn't see anything besides itself if they turned it on. So they have to be able to turn it on.
Because, folks, it is true. Other people can come in and look at your camera. All they have to do is know how.
That's right. But of course, we're all paranoid. We're those old paranoid characters that are crazy.
No, I'm a realist.
This is some of the uranium facilities that we know about.
I think we're a dozenoid if you count all of us, not just paranoid.
Yeah, right. Multinoid.
Bunch of noids.
Yep. This is a little good information you might want to see, some of this stuff. Just 100 kilotons at 500 kilometers. 100 kilotons isn't big. That's about 10 times the size of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki weapons.
Did you say that does not affect the old tube type radios?
Not if they're strictly tube type. Remember, those things operate on high voltage. It doesn't affect them much. It would have to really, really, really hit them hard to affect them a lot because of their basic design is they're designed to work at voltages. It's just the way they operate. They're voltage machines. Actually, the tube is a voltage device that operates on voltage, and a solid state devices are actually current devices that operate on current. And high currents or high voltages will break down their interfaces between the positive materials and the negative material in the PNP device, for example, a bipolar or tripolar device. They break down that barrier that sits between those two, and basically it shorts it out. It creates a short path through there that the thing no longer controls as it should, as far as a conductive device, a solid state device that conducts at that level. And like I say, they're primarily current devices, and when you raise the voltage, what actually happens is it increases the current path that flows across the interface. And so they actually operate more on current, or in the real solid state theory, as far as in holes versus electrons. So they operate different in totally different physical theory than tubes do, but they end up with the same result because of the design. You know, your typical transmitter tube, like I've got a military grade amplifier over here that uses a 3 CX800A7 in it, and its standard operating voltage is 3 kV. Plate voltage is 3,000 volts. You can see that's substantial major damage areas.
Well, I was going to follow up on the chat question that was just posted with basically the same question.
I didn't see it.
Would it be worthwhile putting some radios in my metal safe and perhaps grounding the safe, if that would do any good, to at least for some protection from EMP?
Yes, it would help, but again, you really have to close because some of this energy is at microwave frequencies. You really need to have another flap over the door opening, or an overlap, such that you can't get electromagnetic energy through that door opening area. And you can do that with foil tape or other things that's all grounded and bonded together, and create that overlap or create that seal. Of course, you can also find these little fine wire mesh grounding devices, the grounding material you see in some of your mil-spec or higher quality radio equipment, high frequency stuff that uses a kind of a stainless steel mesh or foam to create the connections across those areas. But there are ways you can do it, and yes, it needs to be completely sealed. And if you're gonna have it in a safe, you need to have it with a safe that has a electronic lock bypass mode, like a key, so you can unlock the thing. If it kills your electronic lock on your safe, it won't do you much good inside the safe.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. Seeing him post
Sure.
that, I've got the.
I've
You
lost
can get.
that was all over the road so much, so I don't know what's going. I mean,
Well, you can also get these Faraday bags, Faraday defense bags. They work good to put equipment in them and protect you.
Yeah, but again, you have to be sure that bag's rated for minus 80 dB in the microwave frequencies.
Okay.
Because the wire mesh spacing in there is critical. In fact, you'd probably want to double or triple bag it with a fine mesh bag to make sure it works, because a solid metal covering is the best. But the shorter that wavelength, the better it can get through that mesh bag. And you can see this covers major areas of serious damage. and upset. You can comment over here. You see any device connected to an AC/DC wall wart adapter would be at risk, even this relatively low level attack. In these slides, you need to go through and look at them in detail to get the full information out of them.
So Gerald, what exactly are we going to be able to do to, be able to at least, protect our equipment? It's indicated that if we have anything that's plugged in, it's going to be done for. So that's probably going to leave just battery operated that's somewhere hidden and protected.
Well, I bought a big salvaged aluminum container from one of the online military surplus suppliers, and it's about 2.5 feet high by 2.5 feet wide and 3 feet long. It's aluminum and has an overlapping aluminum lip on it where it latches down and then seals. So it's a pretty good device. It's probably 20 gauge or thicker aluminum, and that's what I've got some equipment stored in, is that thing. Of course, you can get them. You get some of the military style hardened radios. I got a couple of 80s versions here, 1446s sitting here that are military grade hardening on them, but that's back in the 80s. It's probably not really good for a really bad EMP attack, especially if they're connected up to something.
Sure.
We get onto some of this other stuff. Here's what I'm asking about is information on how you protect stuff. And if you follow these leads, like their mill standards, you can look up these mill standards on the internet, and that'll tell you what to do and how to protect these things. And it can get pretty detailed. Actually, if you had a steel drum, just a 55-gallon steel drum with a steel lid, one of the binder clip type of lids you put on there. If you put it in that steel drum and close it up in that drum and grounded that drum, you'd probably be in pretty good shape. Ground the lid and the drum itself. Of course, if you use that ring binder, it connects the lid to the drum anyway when you clamp it down. So it makes it a good connection, assuming it's not all rusty and poor connection. You need to have it clean and a good connection. You can even put some of your corrosion protection, your aluminum top protection, something like that on it to keep it from getting oxidized and bad connections across there. Your antioxidant treatment like you use for your antenna stuff. So this particular slide does give you information. I believe I have access to another presentation that came a couple of years later than this one that talks a little bit more about protection. I can probably dig that out of the files at Homeland Security to see if I can find that and give it to you another time if you'd like me to look for that one. That's the last one. Let's see. Let me go back to this one here. We want to read this last paragraph here in red. Make sure you see that number right there. That impress anybody?
It'd be better if it weren't from the Washington Times, but yes, it's still, I think, a true statement.
Okay. Any additional questions? That basically is the end of the presentation slides.
Good program. Good program.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that, anyone has to look at is what type of personal, protection have you looked at taking for any type of your equipment? Not only radios, but anything else that you feel like you're going to need should this happen. It was talking about generators and securing a source of fuel for generators, but that's even something that could be in question in securing a source of supply. Let's say you had a supplier with gasoline and said, "Oh yeah, I'll supply you with that," but how's this truck's going to run?
That's right. How's he going to get it?
Yeah.
How's he going to dispense it? I remember the old hand pump gasoline stations where they had a pump on the side of the dispenser. You jack back and forth, and you'd see the volume fill up above you, and then it would gravity drain into your tank with a hose.
Right.
Right. Dispenser. When you hand pumped it out of the tank, the storage tank in the ground, you hand pumped it up into the measuring volume at the top for a gallon or 5 gallons, whatever you wanted. And then you opened the hose spigot, and it would run out of that tank into your vehicle or whatever you're putting it in. Those will still work even without power. They work, they clunk, 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 and they work. But you got to get some way to get it into that tank from the refinery, and you got to get the refinery to run.
Gerald, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Lee had mentioned the generators. A lot of Ham Club members, or several I know of, including Lee and Bill and some other ones, have Generac-style generators that run off of natural gas or propane. What would you do in the case of that? How would you protect one of those type units, or how would you go about protecting one of those type units that they can continue getting power?
Well, first thing you have to do is you have to realize that it's connected. Its sensors are connected to the power line. The power line is the key to that thing operating. When the power line drops, it turns on. So really, you have to have it isolated from the power line. So that's not a good thing for this EMP source, because it took to one of the longest connecting wires in the world. It connected to your power supply line, and if you disconnect it, it's going to come on. And also, all these newer generators have electronics and electronic controls in them. So you need a generator that's fully shielded and freestanding from all other power connections. You need it not plugged into your house. You need it not plugged into anything. And you need a complete shield around the thing, and a grounded can of some sort to protect it if you're going to really expect to have it operational in case of a major failure. And the first thing you're going to realize is you're not going to run your air conditioner. You're not going to run your central heating and air unit. You're not going to run, a 5,000 watt yard light. You're not going to run any of that stuff. You'd be lucky if you can just keep your lights on, keep your water pumped if you have a pump at the house. And you really ought to have a hand pump. I've got a well out here in my shop that's no longer has a regular electric pump in it, and I have seriously considered buying me an old-fashioned hand pump somewhere and dropping it down that well, so I would have an emergency backup water supply out of that well with a hand pump. Because you can't count on the electricity for anything of any quantity, because most of these new houses out here, you're talking about running 3 or 4 kilowatts just to make them function. Well, you start trying to supply 3 or 4 kilowatts power on a 24/7 basis, and that doesn't count any heat, any air conditioning, any of that stuff. That's just basics. That's just refrigeration and lights. Okay.
Okay, so there's no way to put some type of like fuse link or something in that type of system?
That's what we're talking about. We'll go right past that fuse link.
Okay.
In fact, if you think about microwave conductors, the best conductors are hollow pipes, the waveguides. For microwave, a hollow pipe's a waveguide.
Just a thought on that, since I'm having a generator put in that was running through a 9, and I figure once the electronic control board's fried, I'm fried.
That's right. You're better off.
Well, actually, you can bypass that to do a manual start.
Well, I'm sure I could after a little bit of fiddling, or I drag the 5K out of the metal shed and figure out a wire to wire that sucker in, at least keep me going.
You're better off with like what I got. One thing I have out here is I have a surplus military generator. It's powered by a single cylinder diesel engine, and it's a basic alternator. Like it's bigger than your automobile alternator. It might be the size of a truck alternator. It's a 3 kW output, continuous. Probably peaks at 5 kW or 3.5 kW. But it's a diesel engine. There's no electronics on the engine at all. It's a basic diesel. It's got a battery starter on it, and again, that's just a little starter motor. But it's also got a pull rope start, and that's the engine. No spark plugs, no wires, no coils, no ignitions. It's strictly diesel. It's got a switch that you can turn on for the battery start to start it with, and you can heat a little glow plug up with it if you want to make it harder to start in cold weather. You can also use ether, but in the generator itself is just a basic alternator. And again, that alternator puts out AC current. If you want DC, you got to rectify it, which means you got to have electronics in there, okay? Or you could use a electronic rectifier tube, O1A, O2A. Some of those things will rectify voltage.
I bet you an old selenium rectifier worked fine and probably be relatively EMP proof.
Selenium rectifiers are subject to those EMP damages.
Are they really?
Oh yeah. Yep. It's just another solid state bipolar device. That's all it is. It's 2/3 of a transistor, of a bipolar transistor. Bipolar transistor's got 3 elements. It's got a PNP, a P, an N and a P, or an NPN.
Well, maybe I better put a bunch of diodes in my safe too.
The rectifier is just a diode with an N or a P, N and a P. So it's. But like I say, if you go back to the ancient theory of radio operation, then you have voltage rectifiers, like I say, the O1A and O2A, some of those tubes, and you get some pretty high voltage rectifiers in there that rectify AC to DC to run your radio. But you'll find tube type rectifiers that will handle that voltage peak.
Gerald, if it will, what about solar? Has anybody looked into solar power and how it may be affected by an EMP?
Well, again, you've got all those circuits. All your control circuits are electronic.
Yeah, I'm talking about just the panels themselves.
I would say yes, it's possible if they have conductors in them that can generate high voltages, and of course, all those cells are connected with wires, and all those wires go out to your controller someplace. So if you got, and those cells won't endure that high voltage, they'll short. So they would probably, if you have your wires connected to them and anything that would allow that high voltage to come through there, it would probably cause the solar panel to fail.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if anybody had looked at any studies on those or any way to harden them.
Well, I'm sure
they could be protected.
I'm sure they can be hardened. For example, you could put a Xenier diodes in there that would short circuit if your voltage exceeds if it's a 48 volt panel, you put a 60 volt Xenier in there, and if the voltage exceeds 60 volts, it'll short circuit that voltage to ground through the Xenier. That's a standard fail-safe bypass these days. All electronics have Xeniers in there to do that. And other MOVs and so forth that'll do that, depending on the voltage currents and applications. But I'm sure it's possible And if I was going to install a solar panel assembly that I spent a lot of money on, I'd certainly want to inquire of the supplier about its capability to withstand a solar event, because those can happen anytime, any place, any day. So I would certainly follow that up with my supplier to make sure that I had the satisfactory protection, or I'd pay a lot of money for insurance.
Sure.
That's the other thing about solar panels. They talk about low cost solar panels and how much money they save you, but I don't know, but I would guess in Oklahoma that if you put a $50,000 solar panel system on your house to generate electricity for you, you're going to pay probably as much to the insurance company to protect that as you're going to pay for electricity in the first place. So in Hailstorm, Oklahoma, I would look very closely at that.
Actually, most of the panels, I'm looking at putting a solar in right now. Most of the panels are more resistant than our roofs are. So
that's not saying anything. I've seen hailstones as big as softballs in Oklahoma, son. I've seen them come through the roofs. Actually,
thanks for the sun. I haven't been called that in 40 years, but
that means you're right.
Yeah, we can't protect against everything, unfortunately, and that's we always try to hedge our bets and try to figure out what way we can do whatever to protect ourselves. I think understanding a little bit more about what we're facing with an EMP, and for me at least, it's the magnitude is much higher than I ever imagined. And I think that's something that has to be at least acknowledged. I know there are some folks that just think that this is a whole bunch of hooey and whatever, and and hey, that's their choice. I don't believe that, but what I do believe is that even if somebody is let's say a prepper deluxe, he's still going to have a whole myriad of problems. And that, part of that is fending off all those others that want what he has.
if you ever watch Walking Dead, it really, to me, it emphasizes what we'll be facing. So.
It's 1984 fantasy, but I mean, it's fantasy becomes reality soon enough. And Walking Dead, gives people an idea of how things could really go south and what people will do once they're, in that situation, how they'll change just to survive.